The geography of grief and landscape of loss in our country is complex and confused. In a week when we as a nation have replaced our outrage over who can legally use bathrooms with anger and grief over the death of a gorilla, there is so little outrage or grief over the impact of gun violence and the tens of thousands who will die this year, including four who will die by guns across this country before we leave All Saints this morning. And it's because of this out of sight and out of mind landscape of loss that Episcopalians Against Gun Violence and Bishops United Against Gun Violence, which includes our own Bishop Rob, and 99 other organizations, sponsor the Wear Orange movement. We wear orange to stand out and to raise awareness about the grief that comes from a geography of gun violence in our nation. And this move to wear orange is in response to one particular victim of gun violence. On January 21st, 2013, Hadia Pendleton, a 15-year-old high school student from the south side of Chicago, marched in President Obama's second inaugural parade. A week later, she was shot and killed. Orange is the color of Hadia's friends that they chose. They chose to wear and remember her life. And they chose orange because that's what hunters wear to protect themselves and to protect others. So what started in a Southside high school to celebrate a young woman has grown into a nationwide movement to honor all the lives cut short by gun violence. And Wear Orange is also a celebration of life and a call to action to help save lives from gunfire. The National Gun Violence Awareness Day was created to make it easier for people to show their support for common sense solutions that will save lives. Gun violence is an issue that affects communities in every state across our nation. Each year, more than 32,000 people are killed and 80,000 injured by gunfire. And on June 2nd each year, people across our country join together and wear orange, as many of us are this day, to bring attention to that very violent issue. 90 people each day. But Pastor Bill, you might be wondering, we live in a state that is one of the 10 safest in the U.S. But even these 10 states have unacceptable levels of gun violence. And I could go on and on with statistics, but this is a sermon and not a documentary. We who follow the one who stood with the outcast and the victimized, who lived a life that reminds us that to do nothing in the face of sin, of gun violence, is to condone it. Yes, there is unproductive rhetoric of the extremists on both sides of this issue. But I believe that most gun owners are responsible, and surveys show that up to 85% support improvements to gun safety requirements, universal background checks, and loopholes that can allow guns to get into the wrong hands. I know, as a realist, that gaining consensus on these issues and on the steps that we must take to reduce gun violence will take time and patience and persistence. So we wear orange. We wear orange and we talk about this important issue in church because Jesus knows that every day there are people whose lives are affected by gun violence across this country. We wear orange because we have communities where parents are afraid to let their kids play outside. We wear orange because there are people who cannot sit on their own front porches or walk to a corner store. Because no matter where you live, your region, or your zip code. No one should have to live this way. We wear orange because it is the right of every child of God to live free from the fear of guns and violence. The Hebrew Scripture and Gospel readings this morning have both Elijah and Jesus journey through landscapes of loss. Two women of sorrow, both previously acquainted with grief, prepare to bury their sons near the graves of their husbands. Both, having had experienced the loss of a spouse, have also experienced the loss of their social security that their husbands provided in a patriarchal world. And now, with the violent death of their sons, their future, their very social security was no more. It's been taken away. And yet, as followers of the one who died for us, you and I know that death does not have the last word for these widows or for us. God enters into their geography of grief and encounters them, both through the prophet and through the Messiah, bringing life. And each one of us, whether we have experienced grief or loss directly due to gun violence, know the geography, and we share the landscape with them. We share the landscape of a country and culture that is complicit. Beloveds, we wear orange to bear witness to National Gun Violence Awareness Day, to bear witness that death does not have the last word. We wear orange because our safety and our life itself as the baptized is grounded in the hope and the love of Jesus. Jesus, the one who says, "Do not weep. I say to you, arise." Words that fly in the face of all that we see and know and understand. And yet those words possess the life that we are promised as we too are beckoned. Jesus says to every one of us, arise. This day, Jesus says to each one of you, arise. Arise and eat. Come and drink. And we need this weekly invitation because we are dead. We are dead to the things that we have done and to the things that we have left undone. As St. Augustine said in reference to this gospel story, we all are half dead. And so God invites us as well and beckons us towards himself, towards the table, towards the promised feast, where we, like the widow's son, are restored to the one out of whose pain we were born, where we are fed and forgiven through the word, through the bread of heaven and the cup of salvation, where we are lifted up from death to life for the sake of our neighbor. Through it, we can boldly share that in baptism we are joined to the death and the resurrection of Jesus. Death not in the physical death of punishment, but the death to our old selves, of our sin turned in on ourselves. And resurrection, not only resurrection at the end from this physical life, but resurrection right now. Resurrection this morning, in this place, in you, in this very moment, to new selves, a faith turned outward, in faith, in love and service, to God and to our neighbors. Today we wear orange, the color of convicts and hunters, as we take up our cross to follow Christ, knowing that our cross is not the bundle of pains and burdens of life felt by each one of us, but the cross to which we have already been joined in baptism. The cross that daily summons us to die in order to live. The cross from which we know we have a God who brings life out of death, order out of chaos, and hope out of despair.